All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another NFL team preview video for the 2020 season. Today we're taking a look at the Dallas Cowboys as we begin the NFC. And yeah, let's begin. If you're wondering why I'm doing all the Minnesota Wild gear today, it's because today they begin their playoff qualifier against the Vancouver Canucks. So I look forward to that. And hopefully I'll be in a really good mood tomorrow when I wake up and I find out that the Wild have been victorious. Playoff hockey is the best thing in the world, and if you are not into it, I highly recommend it. But today we're talking about football, and for the Dallas Cowboys, it begins a new era, and that new era is without Jason Garrett, likely fired due to the, well, I wouldn't say it's due to the defense or offense as a whole, but just small things that were keeping this team from getting into a serious playoff push. And we'll go over all of that in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the 2019 recap. They were 8-8 overall last year. Offense ranked first in the league. Passing was second. Rushing was fifth. Defense ranked ninth overall. They were 10th against the pass, 11th against the run. Mike McCarthy is your head coach, and it's his first year. Career record of 125 wins, 77 losses, and 2 ties. The snapshot of the previous 4 years is as follows. In 2018, they were 10-6. 2017, they were 9-7. 2016, they were 13-3. And in 2015, they were 4-12. Now, you kind of look at those numbers and you're like, whoa, they were that good on offense and defense as far as statistics goes? Yeah, they kind of were. And then you look at the record, 8-8, you're like, well, how is that possible? And that probably explains why Jason Garrett is no longer the head coach of this football team. Mike McCarthy has come in. And there is some hope on the horizon because this team did very well in free agency, and it is probably one of, if not the best draft classes that I saw out of this previous draft for the 2020 season. So we'll go over all that. So first I want to talk about the projected depth chart for this team, beginning with the offense. And of course we have quarterback Dak Prescott, who is actually going to get backed up by Andy Dalton this year. That's a fun fact. Dak Prescott had a decent season, almost 5,000 yards passing, 30-some touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I think he's worth the money. And in this offense, if you find a player that can fit your offense and you put really good talent around him, I think he's worth the money. So if and when he gets extended, I think it will probably be for an enormous amount, and people are going to freak out because they're like, oh my God, it's Dak Prescott. This can't be true. It's fine. Dak Prescott, I think, is going to prove himself this year if we have anything close to a normal season, which baseball is kind of making that hard to believe it's going to happen. But I think Dak Prescott is fine, and he's probably one of the better quarterbacks in this division as of right now, if not the best, because you take a look at what else they have out there. Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, and Dwayne Haskins, all pretty young guys, and Carson Wentz has his fair share of injury history. So right now, I think he's the best quarterback in this division. Taking a look at the offensive talent around him, of course, he has Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield, who's one of the better running backs in the NFL. And also one of the better backup running backs in the NFL, Tony Pollard, who proved that he could pretty much be an every down back when he had to fill in for Ezekiel Elliott. So a very good, very solid group of running backs behind Prescott. Looking at his receivers, after the draft, it's probably one of the best trios in the league. You have Amari Cooper, who has rediscovered himself in Dallas, who of course does need to do a little bit better on the road, but as far as home game goes, he's one of the top tier weapons that you could give Dak Prescott. They also have Michael Gallup, who had a very quiet 1,000 yard season last year, and then they brought in CeeDee Lamb through the draft from the Oklahoma Sooners, who was probably considered one of the top wide receivers in the draft this year, if not the top. There was a lot of competition between him and Jerry Jeudy to take that nomination, if you will, and to get CeeDee Lamb at 17 overall is just a steal. Just how do you let that happen, NFL? Like, what are you doing? So I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be a very dynamic player in this league. He is an immediate, huge upgrade over Randall Cobb. And Dak Prescott now has just another weapon in his arsenal that is going to make him that much better. Looking at the tight end position, I think it's an upgrade now that Jason Witten is finally gone for the second time. Blake Jarwin isn't a bad tight end. He had, I think, 30-some catches, 360-some yards, and 3 touchdowns last year. If he can double those statistics, I think he'd be a very serviceable, Kyle Rudolph-style tight end, if you will. And the irony of the situation is that they signed Blake Bell in free agency, so you got a couple of Blakes at the tight end position. Anyway, moving on to the offensive line. Still one of the better offensive lines in the league, minus Frederick, who had to retire, unfortunately. Well wishes to him. But if you take a look at Smith, Williams, Looney, Martin, and Collins, that's still going to be, one of the better tight ends, one of the better offensive lines in the league for protecting Prescott and paving the way for Ezekiel Elliott. Zach Martin is one of the best right guards in the league, if not one of the best guards in the league, hands down. And this offensive line is probably going to see some pieces move around, but I still think it'll be one of the more top flight offensive line units in the league, if you will. All right, so moving on to the defense. The defense needed some help through the draft, but they spent a lot of their money in free agency on this side of the ball, getting Clinton Dix into the building, and Xavier Woods is a pretty underrated safety, so this makes for a decent safety duo. For the cornerback position, of course, they couldn't afford Byron Jones, so they went back to the draft and got Trayvon Diggs from Alabama, who I liked as a potential first-round pick, but he slid a little bit, and that's okay. I think he'll do well in Dallas. On the other side, who did I put in? Awuzie, I think is how you pronounce his name. I think I don't know really who's going to play on the other side. I'm guessing it's going to be him, so I felt comfortable enough penciling him in right there. For your linebackers, one of the, on paper, one of the best linebacker groups in my mind, at least for a 4-3 defense. You have Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, and Sean Lee. Now, the only problem, or the only hesitation, if you will, is that they all come with their own personal injury history. Vander Esch with his neck injury, Sean Lee, they basically drafted Vander Esch because they weren't confident that Sean Lee could stay healthy. And Jalen Smith, of course, we know the knee injury that almost ruined his career, who hasn't had any problems since then. But, it's still something in the back of your mind. For the defensive line, they went out in free agency again, got DeAndre Poe, Gerald McCoy. They also have Dexter Lawrence and Smith on the other side. The only issue with this is that they need to do better on the pass rush. Demarcus Lawrence is one of the better, I don't know why I got those two confused. Demarcus Lawrence is one of the better pass rushers in the league, but he only had 5 sacks last year, so they need to do something more dynamic to get in the backfield and create pressure and havoc for opposing quarterbacks. All right, so that's going to do it for the projected starting depth chart for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's take a look at the schedule. Starting off with a home game or an away game against the Rams, home game against the Falcons, a road game against Seattle. That's always brutal to have to travel to Seattle, no matter who you are. Home games against the Browns, Giants, Cardinals. They 2 road games with the Washington football team and the Philadelphia Eagles to round out the first half of the schedule. Nothing really too concerning for the first half, but it's pretty nice to have a 3-game stretch at home where you get to play in your own stadium against teams that should be at least winnable games. I think the Giants and the Cardinals are winnable games for them. The Cardinals might be a dark horse this year. Browns should be competitive. I expect them to be anyway. So for the first half, it's not that bad. But the second half is a little harder. You've got the Steelers, the Vikings on the road. That's a pretty tough place to play. Washington football team at home. Then you got the Ravens and Bengals on the road. 49ers at home. That's a tough game late in the season. And then the Eagles at home, and then we conclude with a road game against the Giants. So the second half is a little bit more daunting with teams like the Steelers, the Vikings, the 49ers, the Ravens on the road. Those are some pretty hard games. So I think if Cowboys fans aren't, looking at that second half of the schedule, I mean, things can change. Teams always could get hot, could get cold. We don't know until we actually get there. But I think the first half of the schedule, if they don't do what they need to do and put away teams that they should put away, they could be in for a little bit of an uphill climb in the second half. But definitely a winnable schedule for them. And we'll have to see how improved their division is. I don't expect the Redskins. I don't expect the Washington football team to be competitive this year. That's going to be a hard habit to break. I can already tell. And then the Eagles have their own problems, but the Eagles are probably the only team that might give them a little bit of a push. I expect the Dallas Cowboys to win this division. I really do. So that's a look at the schedule. Let's talk about the 3 big storylines. We have, number 1, play calling. Mike McCarthy is your new head coach, but he has retained the services of Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator last year. So that's interesting. In Green Bay, that was one of the jobs that he didn't want to relinquish, and I think it ended up costing him his job there. But we'll see how long that lasts. And I'm sure that this will be a 100% Mike McCarthy offense, but the fact that he's going to let somebody else call plays for now is kind of interesting. Number 2, non-divisional games. Now, this is something that I've lightly touched on when we talked about the schedule. The second half, those non-divisional games, the Steelers, Vikings, Ravens, 49ers. They didn't do so hot last year against teams outside of the division. They went 5-1 in the division. So everybody else, they were 3-8. And that's not going to get you to the playoffs. So they have to do better outside of the division. And then finally, we touched on this briefly, the pass rush. I think that's probably why their defensive coordinator is new this year. I believe it's Mike Nolan. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they need to generate a pass rush. They need to have more takeaways, more interceptions. I think they only had 7 last year. Maybe there was more than that. I think that number's wrong, but they didn't have enough. That's what it boils down to. More turnovers, more sacks, and they just have to be stronger on defense. I know the numbers look good, number 9 overall, and pretty good against the run and the pass, but they need to be able to create turnovers to give Dak Prescott more opportunities to put this team out front, because as you can tell, you can have really, really good numbers, but only winning 8 games isn't going to do it. So that's going to do it for this preview of the Dallas Cowboys. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Wild.